Nous sommes ici pour célébrer les festivals du Nowrooz. Bien sûr, nous sommes également ici pour célébrer la nature et certainement comme Lélie Envar l'a sagement fait remarquer, et pour célébrer une architecture, la victoire de la lumière sur les ténèbres. So allow me to make this presentation in English, as I guess it's going to have a wider audience understanding. It is fascinating to have all this group of people presenting from different parts of the world. So I'm very glad to be elaborating in some concepts about interiority and liminal spaces. Basically, mainly as a brief comparison between Japanese and Iranian sense of spatial depth. Being an architect trained in Japan, I run my firm, my architectural firm, and I'm also an academic. I remember my visit to Isfahan in 2017 when I was invited with some other French professors to research more about some of the urban consequences that would happen when the Sayanda River was dropped. And of course, it was inevitable to not to compare some of these concepts that I had been learning or seeing in Japanese architecture with Iranian or some Iranian architectures. And that's what we are trying to put on the table today here. One of these concepts was the concept of oku, or something that we call in Japanese depth or profundity. Basically, you can see, for example, in Japanese language, like okusan, which means wife, which is the woman, which is at the end of the house, in the depth of the house. Both in Japanese and Chinese language, they use the same character. And it kind of also shares three literal meanings. The first one is more related to private and intimate or deep spaces, but it also has to do, in a second meaning, with something that could be sacred or exalted, something enshrined, we could say. And finally, we could say it's also related to something more profound or recondite. So all these three literal interpretations of oku are often reflected either in paintings, in gardens, and definitely in architecture. Oku is not only a concept, but a spatial theory, I would say, that has to do also with the psychological idea of depthness beyond the physical. It is about the experience of transgressing from one space until another, and until you reach this depthness. It's about that experience. When we talk about oku, we can definitely identify some other concepts spinning around or being part of this same universe. Concepts as depth, of course, threshold, layers, even something hidden or sacred, secret, liminality, ambiguity in these spaces, and definitely interiority as much as exteriority, just to mention some few. And one of the seminal actors or architects in Japan who has been arguing about this idea of oku is the Pritzker Prize, Fumihiko Maki. He had been in Isfahan in the late 50s, and he later used many of these ideas to elaborate his theories on collective form, and also I think it was affected with this idea of oku that he started to argue more in the urban aspects. He made this manifesto in the 60s, which is a metabolist manifesto with some other young architects. He was at that time 32 years old. And he took this picture from the plain of Isfahan, and he used it as a collage to superimpose this project that he called Shopping Town, in which was as I was commenting, he was trying more to elaborate on this idea of collective form. But I think he was also making some observations, for example, in the Abbasi Chaharbagh, which is a very prominent avenue in Isfahan, and that he was commenting the first real attempt to a boulevard. Maki also argues about this kind of spaces. This is a typical kyomachiya or a townhouse in Kyoto, where he is explaining how there is this experience of passing from a more public space, in this case the street, penetrating the space, trespassing until you enter to a more private room. And it's about this experience when we talk about oku. Some other architects, like more recent, in this case, architects like So Fujimoto, they are also commenting or taking advantage of this idea of oku in design. Precisely, he comments about the conventional house with a very contained interiority in comparison with the exterior space, and how the house of the future might have something which is embedding both aspects, the interiority and exteriority, in the same space, basically more playing with these thresholds and making it part of the same experience. Obviously, you can see the results are challenging, spatially speaking, for understanding what is inside and what is outside. And focusing on that experience of visiting Isfahan in 2017, I remember the Chehel Sotun Palace, which was very impressive to me. I remember how that space was having some qualities which I was recognizing as much as I had been acknowledging or learning in Japanese architecture, as we call oku. So you can see in this case, as in a sort of Nolly map, different kind of spaces articulated with different kind of axes. So we have first a very prominent axis here with the Nakshe Jahan Plaza here. Then we have other axis for the Shah Mosque. We have also this important axis, which is the Abbasi Boulevard, as I was commenting. And this is Chehel Sotun, which is also translated as the 40-column palace. As you can see, this space is surrounded by a green space, and then it contains one space within another contained space in different scales, we could say. All these spaces are articulated in a very unique manner through this axis, or these axes. So we have also this, in the medium scale, these elements, very linear body of water, which is setting the palace, not in the center of the plot, but a little bit to the left, but still creating a very prominent axis to enter that space. If we observe in the smaller scale, I think it's very important to see this progression between the body of water, which is a little more public, and how it's being reduced in 3 spaces until it reaches proper interiority, we could say. So the space that it's fascinating to analyze here is precisely the space that is devoted for the entrance of the palace. It is a space which is experienced as one single space, but which is designed in 3 different scales. We have large, medium, and smaller scale, and just as the interface between the public and the private. It is fascinating to learn just the amount of space that is used for vestibulating or just for the entrance of that space. So in terms of quantity, you can observe that only the entrance takes the same amount, at least 50% of the space that is designed for the entrance of the private space. So I think there's no other better way to explain this than an interface. It's definitely space that is connecting, but with a very prominent design, especially as I was commenting, because it's broken in 3 elements in different scales. So that creates, of course, a scalar and spatial gradation until we reach to the more innermost space in a very elegant way, I would say. Eventually, all this is experienced in a spatial progression, you could say, where we have one whole space connecting and seeing all the gardens, but which gradually is telescopically guiding you as a visitor until that private space in a very unique manner. So this is just a first instigation, probably, just to consider many of these aspects that I have seen in Iranian architecture, which will continue bringing light in other discourses in our understanding of architectural spaces. So arigato from Tokyo, and happy Nowruz, or better said, waiting for new cycles, new changes